Ooh, welcome to the Gamblin Gauchos. I'm Rob Bro. He's Kyle Jacobson. He's Money Mainville, a.k.a. Monty, a.k.a. Miserable Mainville today. Texas Tech is 1-0. What are we talking about today? Well, it's pretty simple. The Barnett, Howard, and Williams rundown. It's the Week 1 Big 12 recap. That ACU overtime game for the Red Raiders. And a look ahead for lines from Week 2. We'll also do our Matador Transit mailbag ACU special today. So all the questions in there related to this weekend's game, we'll get to those as well. Big show for tonight. Kyle, if you maybe got into a fight with an ACU fan during the game or something like that there in the overtime period, or with a fellow Red Raider, just if you were frustrated after the game, what were you? Who would you call?
Would call our friends over at Barnett, Howard, and Williams. Happy to say I did not get into a fight with any ACU fans after the game. I did see a few, and I told them they played a really good game. They should have beaten us. I hope they didn't take that in a patronizing way. I remember leaving BYU last year and kind of being like, I wish their fans weren't so nice. But yes, if you were in that situation after the game, call our friends over at Barnett, Howard, and Williams, bhwlawfirm.com. They will get you taken care of. They hope you're not in that situation, but it's good to have somebody solid in your corner if you do need them. And they are the best of the best, based in Fort Worth, but handle cases all across the state of Texas. So shout out to our friends over at Barnett, Howard, and Williams.
All right, let's hit the Big 12 really quickly before we get into that ACU Texas Tech game, because I thought there were some really interesting scores from around the Big 12 country, and I don't want to say this as like, hey, Tech fans, everyone struggled, it's fine, because I think there was a little more struggling in Texas Tech's corner that is concerning to me, and there were a lot of teams that did not struggle flat out. Utah hammers Southern Utah 49-0. Nothing much to see there. Cam Rising, 250 yards, 5 touchdowns. He looked sharp, especially in the second quarter. Kansas in the second quarter scores 27. They beat Lindenwood 48-3. Again, I've never heard of Lindenwood. I don't know how much to take from that. Starters played the first half. UCF, Kyle's team, 57-3. They started slow. But in the second and third, just absolutely tore through the New Hampshire defense. Colorado struggles all night long with North Dakota State. Any thoughts on this one in particular as we look at Colorado? All offense, no defense, a lot of substance. Sounds familiar?
It seemed like the exact same as last year. They averaged 2.5 yards per carry. I think they're going to be a team that has like a talented quarterback and obviously good receivers. But to me, they seem the exact same as last year through just one game.
Bunny, any thoughts on Colorado there?
Probably should have had like 4 more late hit out of bounds penalties than they were called for.
Certainly that, especially against Old Shiloh. On Friday night, TCU beats Stanford 34-27. TCU had them doubled up in offensive yards in the third quarter and were trailing. They dominated the second half, scoring 24 to beat them 24-10 in the second half. But TCU really slowly got going. Savion Williams was really good, aside from his drops in the second half. More red zone turnovers for Kendall Briles. Kendall is really, I call him cute Kendall in the red zone. He's not very good in the red zone. Of course, again, TCU fans, if you're watching, you could probably call pot kettle there with Zach Kitley as well. Any thoughts on that TCU game? Did y'all get to watch that one at all?
Yeah, I thought they looked pretty good, and I think that their self-inflicted wounds really held them back in terms of the scoring margin. I thought that they could have played a cleaner game. They probably would have won this game by, closer to 3 touchdowns.
Keep pressing through here. Oklahoma State beats South Dakota State 44-20 on the back of a big third quarter. Ollie Gordon, 27 carries, 104 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kyle's favorite quarterback, Alan Bowman, 267 yards, 3 touchdowns. Kansas State 41, UT Martin 6, Arizona 61, New Mexico 39, and that game was close until the third quarter. Tetero and McMillan with the Randy Moss stat line, 10 catches, 304 yards, 4 touchdowns, and Fafita had 19 completions. 10 to McMillan, 3 to Conley, and then 1 to 6 other receivers. After the game, he said, I probably should throw to everyone else more. I trust them. But when a guy has 10 catches for 304 yards, I mean, there's not much else to do there, honestly. Of course, that game was kind of during the Tech game and at the end of the Tech game, so I didn't watch much of it, but I did see McMillan running free. Cincinnati puts away Towson 38-20. Iowa State over North Dakota State 21-3. In like the most Iowa State game possible, they scored 7 in 3 different quarters and played really good defense against North Dakota. Baylor 45-3 over Tarleton State. More than they could say about Texas State last year. Houston, the lone loser, 27-7 against UNLV. Donovan Smith, 135 for 2 interceptions. Did not finish the game, I don't believe. BYU handles the Salukis 41-13. And Arizona State puts away Wyoming 48-7. Any big takeaways from the Big 12 before we move to the Texas Tech ACU game?
Thought Iowa State's offense looked pretty good, even though they only put up 21 points. Thought they moved the ball well. Arizona State, I think a little bit of a surprise to knock off that Wyoming team the way they did. Thought that was an impressive performance, but I mean, ultimately, you're kind of the biggest red flag outside of Houston on this week 1 slate by your conference.
Yeah, if I was going to reset the power rankings, I certainly would move Texas Tech down. I don't know how far. You're probably outside the top 10 right now, though, would you say, Kyle?
Yeah, I would say bottom 3.
Yeah, it's rough. And maybe not 3. Maybe bottom 2 at this point. All right, let's talk about it. I don't even know how to get into this game. Let's start with the offense because it's the most positive thing we can talk about. Then we can rail on the defense for a while. I thought the first half offensively went about as good as it could have gone. I thought Baron Morton looked really sharp. I thought Josh Kelly looked good. I thought they were feeding Taj early. And I really thought you would be able to pull away in the second half. And that just did not happen. Let's go to you first, Kyle. I guess just some broad thoughts about the game as we start getting into this. We'll start going drive by drive in a second.
Yeah, I guess we'll start with the offense, like you said. I think Morton looked really good to me. He wasn't perfect. He missed a couple throws, bailed out of a couple of clean pockets, but I feel like even those criticisms are pretty nitpicky. I don't feel like he threw the ball into traffic real bad, made some impressive throws that kind of reminded you of what we saw in flashes of him before the shoulder injury. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think that is the first time he started and finished a game completely healthy. And I know it was against an FCS opponent, but that stat line was pretty impressive. His PFF was, I think, 90, which is really good. So hope to see that continue. I think the offensive weapons were kind of what stood out to me throughout the game. Taj, kind of a quiet 150 yards, which sounds weird to say, but typical Taj fashion, like no breakaway for 45 yards. He got all of it, 4, 6, 12 yards at a time, it seemed. Not a lot of help from the offensive line on some of those. It was a cutback or he bounced it outside or something like that. But when he stood out to me last year he was almost overshadowed by the play of Josh Kelly, Coy Aiken, Caleb Douglas, Baron Morton, Jalen Conyers, who only played 16 snaps, but they were loud as hell. So I think that's actually a positive development for Tech. Like, Taj Brooks is his same old efficient, productive self. Only now there's 3 or 4 or 5 other guys that you notice on the offense instead of just him. And I think the PFF grades reflected that. I think the top 8 or 9 guys on the offensive side of the ball were skilled players. So it seems we did upgrade in that department, and low bar to clear based on some of the production in like the wide receiver room and, just what it looks like to rotate 3 quarterbacks throughout the last 2 years. But I think that even though it was an FCS opponent, I feel pretty confident saying that the skill positions were an upgrade. I guess before we pivot to the line, I can turn it back to y'all if you have any thoughts on any of the skill guys and how they showed up last night.
Yeah, Money, what do you think about the skill line? Skill positions.
Thought the utilization of the tight ends was really interesting. I think each one kind of speaks to their own strengths and weaknesses. You saw a lot of John Carlos Miller, which he was listed as a starter, obviously used primarily in blocking situations where I think he looked really good. Kyle, as you mentioned, Jalen Conyers, when he was out there, it was pretty obvious that they were going to air the ball out. Had a great catch downfield that I think was a catch and was ruled a catch, and it was certainly close, but I think that's a pivotal moment in that game is his downfield touchdown catch. And then kind of a quiet night from Tharp, maybe one of the more quiet nights that I can remember from his Texas Tech career. I think he had one grab, but usually you just see his size and length at least get you, one good chunk yardage play a game. It felt like last season, and this game just kind of quiet. I think you found some of that in Conyers, which was interesting, but I think that was one of the main things that stuck out to me. Josh Kelly, as good as advertised, it seems. He's clearly Barron's favorite target at the moment. I think he had 15 targets on the night, which is pretty hefty. Outside of that, you saw a lot of Coy Aiken and then kind of divvied up among the rest of the guys. I thought Caleb Douglas had a good touchdown catch towards the end of the game. But again, 150 yards from Taj, felt like he did a lot of it himself. 6 yards per carry, you might think on the box score, hey, that's a good night from your offensive line. Didn't really feel like that. But then the last thought I had was I was advocating for Cam Brown to get some usage. Joey's been saying for weeks, you're going to see Cam Brown in the game. I think the first game or the first play he saw was a 2 quarterback look where I think he was lined up out wide with Morton still on the field. I'm pretty sure every other time he came in, he was your only quarterback on the field and was running the option. So I think you had some good variance at the beginning, but then it kind of staled out. You kind of knew what was coming whenever he came on the field. So would like to see some more interesting looks with him. That doesn't put you in a jeopardizing situation. But I mean, again, the individual talent really, really shined last night. And it makes you think what this offense can look like if you find something in this offensive line that I know we'll talk a lot about, but not inspiring performance from that group.
No. And again, you look at the clean pockets, you look at the rushing totals, and you say, the offensive line didn't look bad, but in the margins, they just didn't look good either. Let's go through at least the first quarter here. ACU gets the first kickoff and punts 3 and out. Really, really good first series by the defense. You guys stop me if you want to talk about something. Then the second drive of the game for Texas Tech, the first drive for the Red Raiders. 10 plays, 71 yards, 3.5 minutes, touchdown. And it was a Taj Brooks touchdown, first score for the Red Raiders. A 3rd and 13, I believe, that he takes off the right edge to the end zone. What do you think about that on the 3rd and 13? They were obviously going for it on 4th down if you didn't make it.
I think we're pretty fortunate to have scored on 3rd and 13. I don't know if we were technically in the red zone. I can't remember how far out he was when we scored that. That kind of foreshadowed what became a theme, though, was when you got across the 20 or 25, you started getting false starts, holding penalties, made it really hard on yourself. You survived that some drives, other drives you didn't. I was pretty surprised when they handed it off, but it obviously worked. And like you said, Rob, I think they're probably going to go for it, on 4th and 5 or whatever. So unless we just got stuff there, well, I say that we went for it on 4th and 13 later in the game. So I don't know, but it worked out. But it feels pretty fortunate in hindsight because 9 times out of 10, you're not only not scoring on that play, but not converting on 3rd and 13 when you hand the ball off. So it was a great run by Taj. But after you scraped by in overtime, it feels like a fortunate play in hindsight that he was able to break loose and score, because had he gotten stuff there, pretty much every drive wound up being critical. So I guess I have mixed feelings on that. I feel like we got away with one a little bit.
Talk about every play critical. The next drive, a fumble for ACU. Then another touchdown for Texas Tech in 2 plays. And it was a Coy Aiken touchdown. Then you go for 2. And that was pivotal because, again, you win by 1, and that's in overtime. So if everything else remains the same, ACU wins in regulation. And then you go ACU touchdown, Texas Tech touchdown, ACU touchdown, Texas Tech field goal, ACU punt, Texas Tech touchdown, ACU touchdown, Texas Tech punt, ACU turnover on, into the half. That's the first half. Let's go back and talk about some of these ACU touchdowns. The first one, Mohorn just falls down, and that runs a free player into the end zone, and Jed Castles, they kind of tackle him into there. Was that kind of foreshadowing for the rest of the game? Because it just felt like you could not figure out wheel routes, drag routes, crossers, or double moves. All night long, those 4 route combos were just murdering Texas Tech, and that was the first one they got you.
Kind of felt like the courtesy touchdown that you sometimes see at the beginning of these games, where you just kind of let your opponent have one. You know you're going to be in a good spot, so you didn't think much about the first one. But then they start rifling them off, right? It starts becoming a pattern. You start seeing coverages consistently getting busted, and I think that was like the second time it happened, you started to feel some of that concern. And I think it definitely was a little bit of a preview of what your secondary would look like for the remainder of the night.
I think the unfortunate part about that play is if you go back and look at on the rare occasion that we were able to generate anything resembling pressure on the quarterback, that was probably a top 3 pass rush, and they scored a 40-yard touchdown on it.
Yes.
Obviously, you didn't get home, but usually even if you don't get home, you can, force a throwaway, force a bad throw, hit him as he throws, tip a pass. We didn't get any of that on that play, unfortunately.
No. You did follow up that Jed Castles touchdown, by the way, former Red Raider, the first one tonight, with a Coy Aiken 35-yard touchdown pass. It looked kind of like a busted play. He just threw up his arm, and Baron Morton got it to him. That next touchdown by ACU was just a tough drive. And Isaiah Johnson out of Cooper, I wanted him at Tech, and you just didn't recruit him. He goes to North Texas, and I thought he looked pretty good at North Texas as a young player. Goes to ACU, and this is his first touchdown. His second touchdown was just grown-ass man stuff where he runs over Texas Tech and gets it in there late in the game. But this one also a tough run. And again, that at that point, the first touchdown, like you said, Money, all right, they're going to score. It's fine. But that drive, and then the drive at the end of the half where they just murder you on a deep route. On those 2 touchdowns, I'm like, okay, this could be a game here.
I think that, I think the disappointing part is, well, I guess I'll back up. Braylon Lux kind of a late scratch. I think on the broadcast they said he had a thigh injury this week in practice. And in the postgame presser, Joey said basically right up till 1 o'clock on Saturday, they thought he might be able to go and then wound up not being available. In my opinion, of the two corners, I thought Marion Horn played better. PFF does not agree with that. I don't know if the sentiment on Twitter agrees with that. But where I was going with that is what was disappointing is it feels like the lapses, whether it was in communication or coverage or whatever, it was so spread out. I mean, Horn got cooked on that. I think it was an out and up that Castles ran. Peoples got cooked on a hitch and go. Baskerville got cooked on, I think it was that 71-yarder to Stanley. I think that was the young man's last name. And so it wasn't like, hey, we're missing one guy, and if he comes back, then all this gets better. It was, after those first two drives, it was pretty much all game, and it was everybody. And what I noticed on the rewatch, I mean, there's so many times where I think Abilene Christian did a really good job using motion to figure out what we were going to do, and then they were very perceptive. Like, I don't know, I feel like sometimes teams try to use that, and the defenses can still disguise it or not tip their hand well. But it felt like they used motion, and we were like very transparent about what was coming, and they abused that all night long. You can see it when a player goes in motion, like Peoples or whoever would turn to like one of the safeties to try to communicate something. The ball snapped, and then there's a guy wide open, for an easy like 10-yard gain. So that was a constant, and it's good and bad because I look at the guys we put out there, and I like. Baskerville had a good season last year. He was consistently one of your better defenders, especially after moving from the star position. So I know he can play football. Having said that, it was Jalen Peoples' first start at corner. Joey noted that in the postgame presser. It was Marion Horn's first start in college. And Baskerville's trying to communicate with both of these corners that have never started before. And I don't know who's to blame among that trio, but like I said, it was all game long. It was the linebackers. They got abused in coverage. Both Rodriguez and Ben Roberts. So what makes me hopeful is, like, I know we have good players on the defense. I know we have some talent. What we clearly don't have at some spots is experience. And where we were completely outmatched on Saturday was scheme. And we didn't know where the offense was going with the ball. They knew exactly where our guys were going in coverage, and they exploited that all game long. But like Marion Horn gave up a 36-yard bomb down the sideline. I think it was late third quarter. But I mean, he's on his hip, and he was actually even a little bit early in terms of when he like kind of scraped across the receiver's arms. I see a play like that, and yeah, Abilene Christian gets 36 yards, but I look at the corner on that play and think, I don't really know what else he could have done to prevent that. So I don't know. To me, Peoples was the more concerning of the two. But you need both of them to play better. You need the linebackers to cover better. I thought the linebackers are pretty good in run stopping, and you need the safeties to be better. And you combine all of that with no pass rush or them just getting the ball out so quick that you don't really even have an opportunity to get to the passer. And it was just not a good recipe. And like I said, that's the frustrating part. It wasn't like, oh, there's like one thing we need to work on in practice this week. It was pretty much every position group. It was communication across the board. It was like, any kind of coverage we tried to run. Like I said, they seemed to utilize motion in a way that they were then able to exploit us, and they changed some plays at the line very effectively. So it seems like you have a lot of work in front of you on defense, unfortunately. The last note on the corner position, this is frustrating and disappointing, and I think I've quoted President Bush on here before, fool me, can't get fooled again. We should have known when we lost in Laramie last year to just, if Joey says something, just like ignore it and wait and see what happens. We were told all offseason how great the depth was on the defensive side of the ball, specifically in the secondary. And if that's true, and you're missing one of your starting corners like Braylon Lux, you would think that, okay, if our depth is so great, we should be able to handle this pretty well, especially against the worst team we're going to play all year. Instead, both corners got abused all night. and their backups played for a combined 4 snaps. That's Macho Stevenson, he played 2, and Devin Cromwell, he played 2. If my memory's correct, those 4 snaps that they played, 2 of them were run plays, so there's no coverage involved. On the third play, Stevenson was beaten on a slant route on 3rd and 5, one of many third downs that Abilene converted. And then on the last one, MacGyver overthrew a hitch and go, but he absolutely burned Cromwell on it. And so they go in for 2 coverage plays, both of them abject failures. And so I'm looking at this, I'm going, our best corner is not in the game. Our second and third best corners are getting torched, and 4 and 5 cannot go out there, clearly, because after those 4 plays, which I think were in the second quarter, they were not seen again. So I don't know if we believed we had depth in the summer, and once we saw the lights come on, we realized no, we don't, or if we knew we didn't have it and we for some reason wanted to circulate that to the media and fans anyway. But that was incredibly frustrating to watch unfold.
Yeah, Cromwell, that throw on the sideline that was overthrown with Cromwell was lucky, I would say. All right, let's look at the red zone before we get to the second half, and this is kind of going to spill into the second half as well. ACU 4 of 4, 3 touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns, and 1 field goal. That field goal that tied the game at the end. Texas Tech 5 red zone scores, 6 attempts, 1 rushing, 1 passing, 3 for 3 on field goals inside the red zone. That is not good enough, especially when one of your red zone attempts, you get all the way down there. You call a great play with, I think it was Josh Kelly running a zig on the outside, motioning in and running back out. The linebacker tips the ball at the line of scrimmage, and then you just run it. 3 times with Taj Brooks. There was some motion, kind of a fake jet sweep thing, and you're just running right up the middle 3 times. That's not creative enough in the red zone. And if you can't be uncreative and push it in anyways against ACU, that does not leave a ton of hope to be able to push any Big 12 team around.
Yeah, that was frustrating too. As you all know, was a big proponent of 12 personnel and using 2 tight ends all off season. And so I took mental note of when we did have, it was usually John Carlos Miller and one other, usually Tharp. And it was good in a lot of spots. Like you converted a couple third downs, your first 2 plays with 2 tight ends. You had a PI for 15 yards. You had an 8-yard run, a 16-yard run. But in any short yardage situation, when like you should have an advantage going with a heavy personnel package like that, we got stuffed over and over. And yeah, I don't know if that's something you can fix, but I mean, when you have a 225-pound running back like Taj and 2 tight ends in the game, you should be able to move Abilene Christian back 1 yard and into the end zone. So to get stuffed on that drive, but also in some other spots when you I think also maybe tried and got stuffed on one of your 4th down conversion attempts that they stopped you. So I was glad to see the 12 personnel, and I think it worked between the 20s. But when you like really needed to lean on that heavy personnel to try to get a yard or 2, it did not work. So yeah, that was a frustrating. And then Abilene turns around and goes 99 yards with it. That's one of those sequences where if you're able to punch it in from the 1, you probably don't go to overtime. And like I said, in hindsight, in a game like that, every play, every drive becomes critical. And at the time, it was annoying, but I think you maybe had like an 11-point lead or something. So you're just thinking like, oh, that stinks, but at least we got it all the way down there. Like it's not like the offense came out totally flat. But yeah, you're going to need a yard or 2 at certain times with the way you go for it on 4th down, and if you're not going to be more creative in the red zone. And if you can't, bully an FCS team with your heavy personnel package for a yard, I don't know, man. Like that's to me not a good sign. And thankfully, there's other ways you can move the ball with this offense. Like we saw, you've got several playmakers, it seems. But that's the easiest and most direct way to get a yard if you can do it. And apparently we can't. We also tried throwing in the backup quarterback to do it a couple times. That didn't work. So I was pretty disappointed with the short yardage effort at different spots throughout the game.
That's a first Cam Brown run where he comes in, just runs right up the guard's butt. Did not like that play. That felt pretty.
I'm done with the two quarterback thing. Like, if you want to run that when Donovan is your primary starter and utilize that skill set, on 3rd and 3, sure. And that's probably when we had the most success with it. But when everybody in the world knows exactly what you're going to run, and you've got 3 running backs capable of doing the exact same thing, I think Brown only took 2 snaps because, like you said, the other time he was on the field, he ran a route. One of them was a full start on the center, probably because of the just change there in who's yelling out the cadence, trying to get the ball snapped. And the other one was like a 2-yard run. It's like, can we just hand it to Cam Dickey or Todd Brooks to get 2 yards?
Yeah.
To me, that's just not there's no advantage there to doing that. So just keep your quarterback in the game.
Or leave Tharp in there. Put John Carlos Miller in at H-back. Leave Taj Brooks in there. And run a damn lead behind Taj Brooks to the right. And just say, all right, this is what we're doing. We're stronger than you. We've got more people over here. Let's push it 3 yards. Like, if you're going to telegraph it, don't go empty and run up the guard's butt. It does not make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. And again, I think we're nitpicking on any offensive critique because I thought you were really good offensively. My biggest critique, let me run down the second half really quickly because we did the first half. So here are the drives chronologically in the second half. Texas Tech, again, turns it over on downs on their first drive right there at the goal line. ACU goes 96 yards for a touchdown. Texas Tech comes back with a touchdown in 7 seconds. That's a big kickoff return. And then,
hey, can I pause you there?
Yep.
Speaking of how fortunate we seemingly were to score in some of the ways that we scored, we covered the 3rd and 13. I guess this was second quarter when Conyers makes a catch. To call it low percentage is probably understating it. Like, if we run that play 10 times, he might come down with that in the end zone twice. And that's not a knock on him. He was just well covered, had to toe tap. Like, his foot was barely in as it is. And it's on 4th and 13. So it's not like, oh, well, we've got all these other plays in the playbook we could have run instead. If the really long kick return, should you go flea flicker? That's the one you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if we have a kick returner who just calls a fair catch there, who knows if that's a scoring drive? It's not a one-play scoring drive. I can tell you that much. And then there was another one. It might come to me later when we're talking through it. But that was the 3rd touchdown where, in hindsight, it's like, thank God we had Dre McCray take that 55 yards. And it's kind of embarrassing to have to use a flea flicker. But you weren't – I don't know. Your touchdown drives, some of them, the way they finished, weren't like, oh, yeah, this is what it's supposed to look like when a Power 4 team plays an FCS team. Instead, it's like, hey, good thing it worked out that way because there's no guarantee that you score on 3rd and 13, 4th and 13, return a kick into basically the red zone. Not quite, but it in some ways, like you said, Rob, we're nitpicking because the offense scored 45 points. I think only had to punt it once. Other than turnovers on downs, no turnovers. But also, it's kind of like, hey, if those 3 plays, like if Taj gets stuffed on 3rd and 13, Conyers' toe comes up half a second sooner, and Dre McCray calls a fair catch. Those are 3 things that very easily could have happened instead. Like, you might not be going to overtime the other way. They might have beat you by 10 in regulation without some of that, and that's kind of frightening to me.
I think that's dead on. I think that's the scariest part about this game is all the things that had to go right for you to win. Like, outside of the kick returns, Keith Patterson refused to go for 2 twice at the end of regulation. I think that's an area where you kind of let out a sigh of relief. ACU maybe left like 2 or 3 chunk plays on the board just by missing a guy on a pass where he ended up wide open. I think Trey Cleveland had one of them where he dropped it, but a couple of other options down the field. obviously the Conyers catch and how close that was to get that 2-point conversion in the first quarter, which kind of just looked like, Joey flexing his guns a little bit at first, but then, that's a deciding factor. I think it's wild. You can look at a whole laundry list of things that, like, hey, if this doesn't go right, what happens to our win probability? And I think a lot of coin flip moments in that football game went in your favor, and it should not feel like that's the deciding factor in you beating an FCS team. But I think you can make an argument that, 2 or 3 or 4 of those things go the other way. We're talking with a very different tone right now.
For sure. And I have some thoughts on some stuff Money said, but I don't want to jump ahead of you too far, Rob. So go ahead.
All right, let's get back into it. So that's a touchdown for Texas Tech on the flea flicker one play, 35 yards. ACU turns it over on downs. Texas Tech turns it over on downs. Then you go to the fourth quarter. ACU scores a touchdown. And then here's the end of the game. Touchdown, field goal for Texas Tech. Touchdown for ACU. Field goal for Texas Tech. You're trading touchdowns and field goals in the fourth quarter. Oh, by the way, in the fourth quarter, ACU scores 17, Texas Tech 6. Not a great finish there. And then you go to overtime. Texas Tech scores a touchdown, kicks the extra point. ACU scores a touchdown. In the postgame presser, Joey says they love the screens. They love the quarterback draws. They guessed right. Quarterback draw, or at least it looked like it. And McIver was tackled in the backfield for the first time in the game. I want to go back to Texas Tech's final possession in regulation. You get it back with 4:52. Okay. You run a 9-play, 54-yard drive in 2 minutes and 13 seconds. You give them the ball back with 2:39. I rewatched the game today. I watched the game last night at the Overton in the fourth quarter. Shout out to the Overton. That drive, if any time in the game you're snapping it with 5 seconds on the play clock, that's the drive. And inside the red zone, where you clearly have an opportunity to end the damn game, you have penalties, incomplete passes, a play where you snap it with more than 15 seconds, and a play you snap it with more than 20 seconds on the clock.
I've got the breakdown right here if you want to.
Right. I do.
So you got into like fringe field goal range with 4:20 left. I think you were at the 30-something yard line. Where like you wouldn't do this obviously, but like if you just not kneel it because you lose a couple yards, but if you had to kick a field goal from there, you probably could with 4:20 left on the clock. And that's too much time to like have the last possession unless things just go, unless you get 11 yards like every 3 plays. ACU had 2 timeouts up, but you can drain it. You can force them to use those timeouts so they don't have them when they get the ball back. So you're in field goal range with a fresh set of downs with 4:20 left. We go tempo and snap it with 30 seconds left on the play clock and commit a holding penalty. I don't know the down and distance at this point, I guess first and long from depending on where the holding occurred. It's a running clock because it was running before the penalty. So once they get the ball set, snap it at 17 seconds. No clue why. You get it to 2nd and 1 with a big play. We snap it at 30 seconds. And like you have to know at 2nd and 1, like it is extremely likely that we're going to get a fresh set of downs and have the opportunity to force them at the very least to use their 2 timeouts. We don't know how much time they'll get when they get the ball back, whether this possession is with a field goal or a touchdown. We can make sure that they have 0 timeouts left.
And get through the 2-minute timeout.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm fine on 2nd and 1. If you want to throw it out the back of the end zone just to waste 6 seconds and then run it on 3rd and 1, that's fine. Because on 2nd and 1, we get the first down, so we kind of like didn't use as many plays as we could have. Anyway, where am I here? Okay, 2nd and 1, we snap it with 30 seconds left. 1st and 10, we snap it with 14 seconds left on another running clock. It's now 2nd and 1 at the 6. I don't know the numbers on this. You should score a touchdown probably 90% of the time. You have 2nd and 1 at the 6. You've effectively got 7 plays to go 6 yards at this point. We snap it at 16 seconds, and then we throw it to stop the clock. On 3rd and 1, we bring in the backup quarterback for his 3rd play at the FBS level in career history while we're tied, fighting for our lives here. That's the snap infraction. So now we're backed up to 3rd and 6, much lower percentage, incomplete pass on the tip. And at that point, there's 2:40 left in the game. So if you count the field goal that we lined up and had to kick on 4th and 6 because we screwed up 2nd and 1 from the 6-yard line, we ran 8 plays in 1 minute and 40 seconds without forcing them to use a single timeout. It's absolute malpractice. And you can bitch and moan about any of the specific play calls and the second quarterback, whatever. That's just straight up stupid football. And like, it makes you wonder, is there nobody on the sideline? And I kind of get it. If Kitley is like focused on, well, we've got to sub in this personnel package, we're calling this play, he needs an offensive analyst or a position coach being like, hey, reminder, clock's running here. Let's not snap until there's 6 seconds left, 4 seconds left. But we're snapping it at 30 seconds, 16 seconds, 14 seconds, 17 seconds, 30 seconds. It's complete malpractice. There's no plausible explanation for why you're doing that. And I don't understand, just in a more general sense, why football teams are so bad at either playing like for a 2-for-1 or last possession when basketball kind of has it mastered. And like there's this whole strategy at the end of the game of how you extend the game if you're losing, how to shorten the game if you're winning, how to ice it if you're winning. And in football, there just seems to be like no concept of this. Colorado at one point could have like taken a knee and assured that like they wouldn't have to run any more plays. So they threw an incomplete pass, had to punt it back to NDSU.
Yes, so stupid.
I need.
They gave him a Hail Mary.
They did, and they were 4 yards away from losing, just like we were. I need somebody in local media on Monday to show up and not ask, how were the ice baths on Sunday and what did you learn on film? They need to ask Zach Kitley directly, what in the hell were you thinking snapping the ball with a running clock with at minimum 14 seconds, at most 30 seconds? Why are you going tempo in a spot where you're basically assured an opportunity at points? At the very least, if you do nothing but take a knee, you'll kick a field goal like us, which is what we ended up doing. But you can force Abilene Christian to use their 2 timeouts. And again, every play, every drive wound up critical. Abilene gets the ball back with enough time, 2 timeouts in their pocket, and they need every last bit of it because like they're running plays inside the 5-10 yard line on their last possession. And we can argue over that roughing the passer call, everything that led up to that. I would have just liked to see them with, I don't know, instead of what is that, 1:40 on the clock with 2 timeouts. I'd rather see them with 1 minute and no timeouts, which I think is generally the range you could have gotten into had you played it a little bit smarter. It's complete, and Rob, you use the word nitpicky. I don't think I'm nitpicking here. I think that is
no.
I'm glad that Conyers and Kelly and Taj look like studs.
Yeah.
That is absolutely brain dead football. And
outside of
demands
this
an
final
explanation.
outside of this final drive, you're nitpicking. This absolutely is, as you said, malpractice.
It needs to be the first question Zach Kitley answers.
And not 1 minute 40. I believe they had 2 minutes and 40 seconds.
Yeah, sorry, they did. I was looking at, they took 1 minute 40 off the clock, but they got it back with 2:40. But yeah, 4 minutes, 4:20 when you got into the red zone. Your first snap of those 8 plays should be with, what is that, 3:45 on the clock. And instead we go tempo and do it with 30 seconds.
And I guess their thought was to score as fast as possible. But then you run 8 plays. I mean, if the thought is to score as fast as possible, throw it into the end zone. And I guess they tried when they had the holding penalty, but why, when you have a running back that has 27 carries and 157 yards, do you not just run the damn ball with, inside of 5 seconds on the play clock? And again, I don't understand why Cam Dickey and Cameron Valdez didn't get more carries. I get that Taj time is Taj time. He's your best offensive player in some respects, at least was last year. I understand you're going for the record. I understand all of that. But if you want to be great in November, you need Taj fresh. And I think you need a chance to prove yourself in a big situation. And if Valdez and Dickey don't get that opportunity, they're just not going to be ready for next year.
2nd and
Or
1
like,
at the 6.
yeah,
2nd and 1 at the 6. And
run the damn ball.
I mean, it's maddening. And then Abilene gets it back. And like Money was saying a couple segments ago, we're kind of lucky. I remember talking about this during the offseason. Like, throw analytics out the window. My new philosophy on punting versus going for it or whatever, going for 2 versus not, is strictly like, if this is the other way around, what do I want our opponent to do? And I can tell you with absolute certainty on 4th down, when they kicked the field goal on the last play of regulation, I was so relieved that they weren't about to throw it into the end zone that makes me think that Patterson made the wrong call. Same deal on like going for 2, and I can tell you I wanted them to kick the extra point. In overtime, it wound up not working out for them. But yeah, they decided to try to take the kill shot, and I was worried. I mean, like, I was pretty much resigned to the fact we were going to lose that game.
Yeah.
And it's even more confusing because, and I guess Patterson just wanted to avoid the 2-point conversion off, because in the second OT, if you score, you have to go for 2. But if you have a play you feel that good about from 3 yards out, why not run it from 4 yards out on the last play of regulation and say, we're just, I think Beard used to have that philosophy. Like, if you were down by 2, he would always want to shoot a 3 and just say, if we make it, we win. If we miss, whatever. But like, I don't want to go to overtime. If you're at the 6 or the 8, it's a different calculus. But if you're inside the 5 and you've got a play that you like, you might as well run it at the end of regulation. So I'm surprised they didn't. I don't know if it would have been the same play call, that quarterback draw out of the empty set. But man, I feel like beyond fortunate that we got away with one. I don't know. I was in the mindset that we were going to lose that game in the 4th quarter in overtime. Just being in the stands, I mean, it felt inevitable.
And I guess this final offensive possession, I've got 2 thoughts here. First thought is, I guess this final possession, you're trying to score as fast as possible because you don't trust the defense. And if that's the case, you just miscalculated. You couldn't score. And that's a failure in its own right. The second thing is a point you made earlier, Kyle, about there's got to be some analyst or something on the sideline running clock management. All right. I love Joey McGuire. I think he's a great program leader in the offseason. I think he and his recruiting staff have been really good. But he is the analyst that should be running clock management. He has to be. He's not a play caller. He doesn't run the offense. He doesn't run the defense. Somebody's up there with the book running the 4th down calls. He has to be the guy saying, Zach, run the ball on this down, or Zach, quit having Baron Morton snap it with 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Zach, what are we doing? Kitley, what are you doing? Baron, hey, if you need to call a timeout and say, all right, on this drive, gentlemen, it's 3 minutes. You have to run the clock. I mean, that's got to be Joey's job. It has to be. Joey has to be better at clock management.
And it's even more dumbfounding, and this might be nitpicking, but I think it's fair. It's even more dumbfounding with in-helmet communication. Because the first time it happens, if it's on the QB, hey, you can talk to him up to 15 seconds in the play clock. Hey, Baron, hey, we're running halfback draw. Don't snap it until 3 seconds are left on the play clock. But there's just no excuse. Like, you intentionally ran your offense at that tempo and did nothing to stop that, and very well put yourself on thinner ice than you needed to be because you didn't manage the game correctly. You didn't communicate correctly.
Yeah.
There's another comment here from Thomas. We also don't know if they're doing any of this in practice. You'd hope they'd be able to slow it down, but the philosophy of tempo is from Kitley. That's the culture. That's what I was thinking too. If you're always going fast, it's hard to go slow. Like Iowa, they always go slow. So when they're in a situation that they have to go tempo, it's weird for them. That's why I hate going tempo 24/7, because there has to be an opportunity where you have to go slow. There has to be. And that's always killed us with Cliff. When you're up by 10 or 20, it felt so harmful because you're throwing it or you're running it 3 times and putting it back, or you're having an incomplete pass and you just can't close out games like that. You have to be able to run tempo, and you have to be able to chew clock, as they call it on the video game.
If you're in a tie game like that, in that spot, and you get into fringe field goal range with 4:20 left on the clock, what are the odds? How likely is it that in those final 4 minutes you have like a true need to stop the clock to preserve it in the final 4 minutes? It's not high. Like, there is a scenario where if you score on the next play and they get the ball back with 3:45 and then they score in 2 minutes, that, like, yes, you would want timeouts. But like what Money was saying earlier, after you get that first down, take 39 seconds off the play clock. If they don't call timeout, use one of your own. You have 3 in your pocket. Like, you don't need to stop the clock anymore. You need the run clock. So run it down to 39, take a timeout, and tell your quarterback in the huddle, like, hey, if it's a running clock, we're not snapping it until there's 5 seconds left on the play clock. Be smart about not taking a sack so that we don't wind up outside of field goal range. Don't throw the ball out of bounds. Instead, slide, find a check down, keep the clock running, tell your receivers stay in bounds, all that stuff. Like, I don't know what we needed those 3 timeouts for that badly at that spot, that we couldn't use one of them to remind everyone of, like, hey, this is the situational football that we're in right now. Here's how we can maximize our odds of winning the game, because we almost screwed around and ruined it for us because of just like straight up malpractice.
Yeah, and we really haven't gone deeply into the defense yet. I did mention earlier all of the routes you struggle to cover. There is a user on Twitter who is claiming that it felt like ACU in the second quarter got a hold of Texas Tech's defensive signals and figured them out. I know we throw this term around a lot, but I think it's also underrated how big of a Super Bowl this was for ACU's roster. Kyle, you hate when I say this, but this is a small Texas team going up against a big Texas team, and that always matters. It really does. And they had 18 players from Division I rosters back down at ACU in this offseason. Nehemiah Martinez, one of the kick your ass. Maverick McIver, one of the kick your ass. Jed Castles, one of the kick your ass. And it just did not seem like you wanted to kick theirs back at times. I do not feel like you came out slow. Again, similar to Wyoming, you got the lead in the early goings, and you just did not finish strong in this game. Hopefully it's a one-off. But coverage-wise, it just did not feel like a one-off. It felt like you have some deficiencies back there.
The numbers are so bad, and I think the film backs this up, that this does not feel like it will be an outlier. You allowed 7.2 yards per play, which is higher than you allowed any game last season. You allowed 506 passing yards by a guy that threw sub 2,000 all of last year. That's the most you've allowed under Joey McGuire. The highest last season was 359 from Bo Nix. You allowed 615 total yards of offense, which was the second most under Joey, only trailing the OU game with Dylan Gabriel that went into overtime. So you had statistically one of your worst defensive games under Joey McGuire against an FCS team. I don't think that's something you can chalk up to, hey, this is week 1 jitters. This is, a one-off performance. Hey, we're down Lux. Once he gets back, everything will be fine. This was really the perfect storm between a non-existent pass rush and an inexperienced secondary. And you can't have no pass rush and bad pass coverage. That's how you allow 45 points a game. 50 points a game. If you're going to have bad play in the secondary, you better get off the line like your hair's on fire, get to the quarterback, and try to cause some chaos. That didn't happen last night. You gave McIver quite a bit of time in the pocket, and while he was sitting back there, his receivers were getting open, and your coverage was breaking down because you were running what really looked like a strip defense. Like, it looked like you were running pretty basic zone concepts for most of the game, and I imagine a lot of that was intentional to try and make it a little bit easier on these young corners and coverage, but I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a couple of weeks until you get Esther's back. It sounds like a really quiet night from Amir Washington on the line. I think I was expecting a little bit more from him after the bowl game, but just that combination is just, it makes your defense really, really sketchy. And I think, it's hard not to look ahead and think, okay, our next two games, which I think were, you felt good heading into them at the beginning of the season. Now you're staring down the barrel at a Washington State team that just scored 70, and you got to go play them in Pullman. And who knows what North Texas is going to be when you play them, because their kind of mantra the last couple of years has been, hey, we're going to score 56 and give up, 55. But if we can win more games than we lose, then we're in good shape. And that hasn't really come to fruition yet. But I just think the way you played in this game, the fact that it doesn't seem like any of these issues can be fixed overnight, I think the next two games on the schedule are really sketchy to me. And I don't want to move past this game yet, but I think there were a lot of things that are really hard to stomach even before you get into Big 12 play.
Yeah, and Jarrett Johnson, I believe, reporting that Joseph Adedire is going to miss the season
That's not good.
of Inside the Red Raiders. So, yeah, all that depth doesn't exist anymore. You're thin again.
Yeah. Dylan Spencer out for the year, if that report is true, and then however long you're missing Esther's, like, that thins up real quick. Almost to the point I wonder if you will see an appearance from Isaiah Crawford or Cheeto Feely. Like, at some point, if it's that bad, I get it from the coach's standpoint. They're like, oh, we see these guys 40 hours a week, and we've seen them play 500 snaps in the offseason in the spring, and this guy grades up better. Okay, fine. But like, the lights came on, we played real football that counted, and we had defensive ends out there that did not generate a single pressure.
It's too bright. Turn those lights off.
At that point, like, what's the harm in seeing what the hell could happen if Ophelia or Crawford goes out there? I mean, I hope we don't get to that point. Like, it's Isaac Smith's first game in 2 years, I guess, or a year and a half, if you because he finished the end of the 2022 season. But yeah, I was kind of banking on Adedire and Esther's coming back at some point, and now it sounds like Adedire may not. And money, to your point, like, if you built a group of 5 team in a lab that you don't want to play right now, it's like a spread it out, air it out. I mean, I think other than like the service academies running the triple option, these are like the last 2 offenses I would want to see in our next 2 games. Yeah, I'm way more confident in our ability against the run, which that wasn't great, but it wasn't dreadful all night. Amir Washington, according to PFF, did generate 3 pressures. His pass rush grade was only 60, which is slightly below average. But he was the only one that looked like he was about to break through at a couple different times. Nobody else generated more than 1 pressure. And stating the obvious here, but that's not going to work in Big 12 play. Like, you need to get off the field on 3rd down. One of the best ways to do that is by creating havoc on obvious passing downs. And we did it, I think, 3 times. We almost got McIver. One was a 40-yard touchdown to Jed Castles. One was the roughing the passer at the end of regulation.
Yeah, which was bogus.
And then probably the 3rd best one was a long touchdown to Nehemiah Martinez. And so I'm like, look at our 3 best pass rush snaps: 0 sacks, 0 batted balls, 0 forced throwaways. Instead, it was touchdown, automatic first down with a 15-yard penalty tacked onto a 5 or 6 yard gain. That's the part of this that makes me think like there's no way, as bad as our pass rush is, there's no way that our 3 best pass rush plays in any game going forward can be that bad in terms of outcome. Like you have to have some positive regression to the mean there. Just like if Taj had averaged 28 yards per carry this game, I'd be like, well, he's not going to do that all year. It's going to come down to 5 or 6. There's no way on the off chance that you do generate some pressure that you get that bad of a result every time. So you need to generate more of it, but also you kind of, I think, can expect that not to hopefully be the outcome on the rare occasion that you do generate a little bit of pressure.
Yeah, and 2 years ago in this edge group, you needed Joseph Dadary to play quite a bit as a true freshman. Last year, you needed Dylan Spencer to play quite a bit as a true freshman, so I would not be surprised to see a true freshman have to play this year.
I wonder if you also see Bryce Ramirez go back to that. He's gone back and forth between inside and outside his whole career. I mean, if it gets that bad, he's a guy you at least has some age experience. You can trust him out there. I don't know if he's a game changer at that spot who's going to finish with 6 or 7 sacks, but I don't know. That could be in the cards.
And then you had Dingle only play a couple of snaps, but he had a forced fumble. You did not recover the fumble, but there was a forced fumble there. Just to double down on Washington State here, John Mateer was 11 for 17, but with 352 yards on 11 completions, 5 touchdowns. That seems wrong, but apparently it's true.
We also had
they also had 225 rushing yards.
Jeez. We also had a couple plays where both of the stars, McCarty and Brennan Jordan, were on the field at the same time. What I don't know, I think they took off one of the inside linebackers when we ran those sets, which I don't think is something you want to do long term. I think you want those 2 guys on the field. But I don't know. You might have to get creative with getting out of your base personnel package. If you're bringing 4 and there's no pressure generated and you're really thin at edge, I don't know. It seemed like we tried dropping 7. We couldn't cover anybody. We tried a couple blitzes. We brought 6 and didn't get home against presumably the worst team you're going to play all year. So I don't know what you do, especially now that you're facing injuries at key spots.
All right, one name we have not mentioned today that the Twitterverse is running wild with speculation. 5-star wide receiver Micah Hudson was on the field in the first half. I believe his first snap was the Jalen Conyers touchdown. I believe he had 4 total snaps, 0 targets. In the post game, he was Joey McGuire was asked about Micah Hudson, and he said, "Hey, the other guys were playing well. Now, he's the 5th guy on the depth chart. The first 4 guys were playing well. He didn't get the field." All right. I guess that's, true. But I'd still like to see him more. And again, that's, I guess, nitpicky, but we said this offseason, do not be surprised if Micah Hudson is not like the number 1 guy immediately. He's going to have to get used to this level and work up to it. I said something about him redshirting potentially and got laughed out of the building. What are your thoughts after game 1 here with Micah Hudson not seeing the field much?
Yeah, I think Joey in the post game also had said something along the lines of, "Hey, those guys were playing really well, and Kelly and Aiken and Douglas," but also kind of touched on the inexperience of Micah Hudson and said, "Hey, those guys were all playing well and they were all experienced. So, we needed those guys in there because they're more experienced. We didn't want to throw a young guy out there and, have the game hinge on him." Like, my initial reaction to that was like, this is your best opportunity all season to get that guy snaps. And you just kind of blundered it. And there's really no one else to blame except for how you executed the game and the way that the game went. But I just think, I I don't think Micah Hudson being on the sidelines for most of this game was the reason why the game played out the way it did. I think you had a perfectly fine night from your receivers. Would I have liked to see Micah Hudson catch one of these smoke screens that Taj Brooks was catching for some reason? Yeah, sure. Why not? Do I think it would have, drastically impacted the outcome of the game? Probably not, but it was just kind of odd, especially after all the comments throughout the offseason about what an impact he would make and how it would be prevalent from week one. It just felt like you got put on your heels, and it was like, yeah, we're not doing that. We're not even going to think about that right now. It was just surprising to me.
I want to talk pretty extensively about Joey McGuire's post-game comments, but this kind of ties in. Joey basically said after the game that there was very little acknowledgement of the inherent disappointment of surviving in overtime to a team that you were favored to beat by 32 or 34. And part of the downside to not coming close to covering in a game like this is you don't get to stick some freshmen out there and get Cam Brown some practice taking snaps, try another guy at left tackle or edge and see if they flash something that you think, oh, maybe he gets 12 more snaps next game. When you're fighting for your life for 60 minutes, you don't have the luxury of bringing a guy like that into the game. And I call it a luxury very intentionally. I think from a fan perspective, it's kind of a weird fixation. Like my first thought walking to Chili's after being certain we were about to lose a football game to Abilene Christian wasn't like, oh, well, if our freshman wide receiver had played, maybe like just didn't even matter to me at that point. There's so many other concerns. Like unless he can play defensive back or sack the quarterback, I just don't really know why we're fascinated with how much playing time he got. We needed no help at receiver. We scored 45 points in regulation. And yes, he's the highest graded prospect in school history, but A, he missed the entire spring with an injury. And B, the recruiting rankings kind of like end at the doorstep when you get here. I mean, that's awesome. And I'm glad he's here. He clearly has all the potential in the world to turn into a superstar. But, who are you taking off the field? I mean, Caleb Douglas was great. Josh Kelly was great. Coy Aiken was great. And you were clearly committed to using a tight end, which is something our fans bitched about nonstop last year, was that we don't use tight ends. And now it's like, hey, why aren't we pulling these guys? Like, you got 3 receiver performances better than like anything we've gotten from a wide receiver in the last 2 years last night. And we got tight end usage all game long, which is what we've been clamoring for. And like one of the top takeaways besides just how did we survive Abilene Christian is like, why didn't this one specific wide receiver who didn't play at all in the spring play more? I kind of don't. I get it because I know, and we talked about this too, fans thought coming into the year he was going to get 1,500 yards and 20 touchdowns. And there's absolutely no precedent for that, no matter how highly rated any prospect is. And I think even trying to be as realistic as possible through a 1-game sample size, it's like we probably overshot his season totals. I think we landed on something like 40 catches for 500 yards. But if he still has a ways to go before he's earning 20, 40 snaps a game against better competition, there's no assurance he's going to get into the game in Pullman if we're fighting for our lives up there. And with the opening spread, which I know we'll also talk about in a little bit, certainly seems to be the indication. You don't have the luxury to like go play a freshman who missed the entire spring while you figure this out. Like you're clearly looking like you're going to be on the ropes week by week. I would love to throw him out there. I want to see what he has, but like you're telling me when we need a scoring drive to beat Abilene Christian, that we should be more focused on like getting a certain number of snaps in for a freshman wide receiver versus just trying like hell to get Josh Kelly the ball. I don't know. It's a weird fascination to me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the shock moment fans needed to recalibrate expectations. Like he's not going to come in and win the Heisman Trophy as a true freshman. Maybe he did on the college football 25 dynasty you're playing, but like that's not real life. I'm surprised he didn't get more run than he did, but it's also like not in my top 10 takeaways from the game, really.
If he was a 5-star corner and didn't play last night, I would be furious. If he was a 5-star safety and didn't sniff the field but 4 snaps, I would be like, what in the hell are we doing here? You scored 52 points. You scored 52 points.
Yeah, it's not Braden Fajoko on the worst defense in the country or Jack Anderson on a terrible offensive line. Like, it's a receiver who, belaboring this point intentionally, missed the entire spring. Like, he's been practicing with the team for 3 weeks, on a team that apparently looks loaded at offensive skill position in a game where you didn't really need much help. If Micah could have helped manage the clock, sure. Like, make him an intern and say, hey, coach, we don't need to snap the ball till there's 8 seconds left on the play clock. But, I mean, other than that, I mean, you didn't need more spectacular catches. You didn't need any more guys running open out there. Like, you had all that covered. You just kind of pissed down your leg on the defensive side of the ball.
This comment, good young players are going to stop coming here if they don't play for the first 2 years. Well, it's been 1 week there, guy. It's been 1 week.
And also, they're going to leave everywhere else when they don't play, and we'll get former 4-stars from all these other schools. And we'll get them once they're 20 and have been in a college strength and conditioning program, and they've been through a couple spring practices. That's kind of how it is for everybody in the country right now. Now, I can also sympathize with Micah Hudson. You're a guy, you could have gone anywhere. I don't think he'd be getting immediate playing time at Georgia or LSU or wherever else he wanted to go. But he's got to be thinking to himself, I could have gone anywhere, and I'm sitting here on the sideline watching us, in overtime with Abilene Christian. And so I know, like, the immediate reaction is to jump to, like, well, how can we keep him happy and make sure he doesn't transfer? I don't know. To me, again, that seems like a luxury problem to have when you're the kind of program that is in overtime in a game that you were favored to win by 34 points.
All right. I'm going to say it. Final thoughts on the ACU game? Let's start with Money because I want to ask Kyle something specific. Money, any final thoughts?
Last thing I don't think I covered was 11 penalties called against you.
Yeah,
the most under Joey. Yeah. And I mean, it was across the board, which is way more concerning than Monroe Mills getting called for 3 holding calls. Like, this was false start Sterling Porche, false start Davion Carter, false start Vinny Scurry, false start pretty much the entire line, a holding on Ty Buchanan, and a false start on Sheridan Wilson. That's your entire offensive line, sans Caleb Rogers. I mean, out of all of the issues last night, I think defensive secondary is a huge, huge, huge weak spot for you because you're so inexperienced and you're a little banged up right now. But your offensive line, I think we knew was kind of a work in progress coming into the season. But it's clear that there are some very real individual weak points, and just certain, play styles and guys that are better at pass pro than they are in run pro. And it's just, it hasn't come together yet. I think that's the best way to say it. This is a unit that is not playing together. At least was not last night, from pre-snap execution to creating gaps in the run game. It looked really, really discombobulated. And I think that's something that, looking down the road to Big 12 play is going to have to improve. I think it's an area where you maybe have a little bit more of a realistic chance at improving. I think, some of these guys are just going to be who they are. I think in the secondary, you can't get older. It's going to kind of be what it is for the remainder of the season, but your offensive line has to start playing together. You've got to start playing as a unit. And I think that's going to be a huge opportunity for Clay McGuire to kind of establish what he's about in year one as Texas Tech's O-line coach. Can he, turn this into chicken salad somehow? Because this team needs it.
Kyle, I did want to ask your stadium experience along with your final thoughts. I was in the press box, but you were in the stadium. And then the south end zone and the drone show.
Well, on that last thought from Money on the O-line, how do I want to phrase this? I think it's fair to have some questions or for there to be some lingering confusion on why exactly a change was made at the offensive line position coach this offseason. I think probably we won't ever get the full story on why exactly you made that change. But I will say about Stephen Hamby's units, they did seem to get better as the season went on. And maybe the biggest example of that was, I guess this was game 2 in year 1 against Houston. And that young man from Houston, Parrish, had, I think, was it 6 sacks that day? Or maybe 6 tackles for loss, like 3.5 sacks. He destroyed you all game long. And like you rewatch the tape and you're like, our left tackle is getting abused out there. Like to the point of I don't know if we can block anybody all year if it is this bad. And it didn't get so much better that like, you know, the left tackle became the best player on the team that year. But you didn't give up 6 tackles for loss to the same guy ever again or anything close to it. Like you got to the level of serviceable or manageable. There's no guarantee that's going to happen with a new position coach. I'm not saying that it won't, but if Hamby were still here and game 1 looked that bad out of the gates, I would have been like, you know, that's terrible. We'll call it what it is. But there's at least precedent that by game 6, game 8, game 10, it may not look like this. And I don't know if we have that assurance right now. Money, you nailed it on the penalties. Sometimes you have a lot of penalties and they're not that costly. It's hard to measure the costliness of a penalty. Ours seem to like ruin promising drives, extend drives. You know, when we were on defense to extend an Abilene Christian drive, absolutely has to be cleaned up. Thankfully, that's one of the things you can only do so much about a guy's talent in the middle of a season. Like your quarterback can throw it as far as he can throw it. That's not going to change by November. You can clean up false start penalties and lining up offsides. Like all that is between the ears. And I'm going to say something really nice about Matt Wells. One of his points of emphasis was specifically pre-snap, post-whistle penalties. He said, hey, you're playing football. You hold a guy, you commit pass interference. It happens. You're playing football. But you hit a guy late out of bounds, you line up wrong, you false start. That's 100% mental. You need no talent to do that part right. And so these are things I look at and go, hey, we may not have the horses this year, but we don't need them to line up on sides and hold our water till the ball is snapped. All of that is fixable, especially week 1. You know, if you have this performance week 7 from a penalty standpoint, pretty inexcusable. Week 1, okay, maybe you make a big jump week 2. Last thought on the game, and then I do want to talk about this post-game presser. One of Joey's points of emphasis is the middle 8, the final 4 minutes of the second half, the first 4 minutes, final 4 minutes of the first half, first 4 minutes of the second half. This wasn't all quite the middle 8, but if you flex it out a couple minutes either way, that was when you had your drive stall, I think at the 1 yard line. ACU gets the ball back. They score 71-yard touchdown. You get the ball back with enough time to score and blow it because of penalties setting you back. And then in the second half, well, shoot, I might have that order wrong. Anyway, the middle 8 or 10 was bad. And so I know that's probably going to be harped on this week. I think that's all I have, Rob. If you're ready to start talking more like big picture takeaways and what comes next.
Well, what'd you think about the drone show in the third quarter?
Yeah, it's the deck chairs on the Titanic. It truly was impressive. The south end zone blew me away. The uniforms looked awesome.
Yeah.
The sound system was so great. You had a bunch of people on Red Raider Sports complaining it was too loud.
It was shaking the press box.
But like, do I care about that after you should have lost to Abilene Christian? No.
Friend of the program, Casey Cowan, is the PA voice. Did you enjoy that?
I thought that was him, but I never saw an official announcement. It was a subdued Casey Cowan.
Yeah, I'm sure they said it. Don't be crazy. By the way, USC has just taken a lead, 20-17, 5:40 left in the game. Okay, yeah, they made the extra point. I thought they missed it. Pretty good game going over here. All right, what 3,000-foot view do you have for the rest of the season now that the defense looks so poor?
Well, I want to talk about this post-game press conference first.
Okay, let's do it.
Have either of y'all watched it?
Yes.
Okay. A quick summary for our listeners who maybe haven't, and y'all tell me if this is an unfair characterization. Joey was there for about 20 minutes and the panel of players for about 10 minutes. Joey says some things to the effect of, I think his words were like, we honor the victory, and like we don't hang our heads just because the opponent, we don't hang our heads because it was in overtime on the last play. It's like a win is a win. It's hard to get 1-0. We weren't 1-0 last year. I mean, it was frankly a lot of spin. Like, we're supposed to feel good about this. And I guess I have two opposing thoughts on it. On one hand, I kind of admire it that he is able to be that relentlessly positive, because I would not be able to be if I were in his shoes. And I don't know, he knows his team better than I do. Maybe he is certain that that's the right approach to take in the locker room. As a fan, what you would like to see from coaches and administration, and this goes back to like when Wells survived the end of his second year. To me, I had seen enough. It's like this isn't good enough for the standard you expect, for the amount of money you make in that position. If we bring him back, to me, that's the leadership saying, like, we're fine with winning 4 games. And I'm not fine with winning 4 games. There was no communication like from the leadership that like, hey, we're as frustrated as you are. We recognize how bad this is. We have a very strong sense of urgency to make it get better. And it's frustrating as a fan. And so I know Joey has to be calibrated with his remarks, especially publicly to the media. And it's not wise to just go in there and just run down your team and say, oh, I thought this guy played awful. That guy blew this coverage. All my position coaches and coordinators are terrible. You can't say that either. But, like I'm just a fan, and like it doesn't matter. I'm not part of the equation that matters. Like, it's a game for the players and coaches. They're the ones truly invested in it. But at the same time, we can't pretend like this isn't a business of sorts. Like, it's the fans turning on the TV sets that's getting every college athletic department paid right now. That's what Fox and ESPN are paying the Big 12 for, is however many viewers they can get on TV every weekend. And like, you use PTO, you spend a weekend away from your family, you drive 9 hours round trip, you pay for season tickets, and you hope that like if there's any one game on the 12-game schedule that I don't have to be biting my nails in the fourth quarter, like it's this one. There was a tweet that summed it up pretty good. I think he listens to this podcast. His name is Ryan Evans. And he tweeted something like, I just want to be able to wear a double T hat or shirt on Sunday and not be embarrassed about it. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, if I have to walk out of this stadium after losing to Abilene Christian, I mean, I just don't know why I spend my time and money and, care factor doing this if this is what we're signing up for. I mean, like, who would willingly volunteer for that? So to have like I don't know, to misread the room that badly and not sense like how much frustration and warranted frustration at that there is, that you just should have lost a game to a team you were favored to beat by 5 touchdowns, was kind of maddening. And maybe that was the message to the media, and maybe practice this week is going to be living hell, and maybe they are mad as hell about it. I don't know. But I honestly, I can't blame any fan for feeling whatever type of way they want to about this. I guess the only silver lining is that Abilene didn't get 4 more yards last night, because if they had, like, to me, anything is on the table in terms of how you want to feel about it. People have made some Wyoming comparisons. In hindsight, that seems like, now the obvious difference, you lost that game, you won this one. But in hindsight, that seems like a pretty normal, like, okay, you go on the road, you're a 12-point favorite, not a 34-point favorite. at a notoriously tough place to play, and you lose in double overtime. Not great, but that kind of thing happens every single week in college football. We were 3 yards away from the worst loss in program history from a point spread standpoint. And I don't know that for a fact. I'm pretty sure you haven't lost a game as a 35-point favorite. I mean, that's so to wear a smile and be like, oh, everything's fine. Like, no. They get one more block on that last play, or they call a different play and throw a jump ball in the end zone. Like, we're dealing with like literally the worst loss in program history. So it's frustrating for me that, again, I kind of admire in a way Joey's ability to somehow maintain any amount of positivity about this. But I also really hope there's people in the building really pissed off about this and committed to doing whatever it takes to ensure that nothing like it ever comes close to happening again.
This game felt a lot like throwing up. And, you can kind of feel it in your stomach at first. And your mouth starts to water, and you know it's coming. But you still got like 10 minutes of just like anxiety and the like anticipation that like this is about to happen. And then once it's over, you're like, okay, that sucked, but at least it's over now. And I mean, as soon as ACU got the ball back at the end of regulation, I thought you were going to lose the game. I thought you were going to lose the game multiple times last night. And so to win the game, obviously, I think you avoided a complete disaster by doing so. And I think there is some merit to that. But I am not going to be one to say, you know what, look at the guts on our Texas Tech Red Raiders. They were in a nail biter against the fighting Wildcats of ACU, and they found a way to get it done. They should hang their hats high on that. This was, by all accounts, an embarrassing performance. Regardless of what you tried to do to manage the expectations of this team, I think this was not the performance that you would have had heading into week one. And it's not good sportsmanship. It doesn't help that there's a lot of connections between these two programs at this point. But, man, I really wish the sentiment after the game would have been, that was absolutely embarrassing. We got our asses kicked on both sides of the ball. We got pushed around. They chewed up our defense. We've got to be better. We're going to go work on that throughout this week before we go to Pullman. And it didn't feel like there was a lot of that. And again, Kyle, as you're mentioning, the way coaches relate to the media is always going to be different than how they relate when it's internal and there's no cameras or microphones on. But man, it felt like that would have been a good time to say, this is not my expectation for this program. We have to be better. We're going to be better.
Yeah. And it's Joey's first. Again, the Wyoming loss to me was put into a different perspective after this, because 12 points on the road to a team that won 9 games is kind of like sucks, especially sucks traveling all the way up there and seeing it. But I mean, this is just on a whole other level of anything I've seen. I've seen some disappointing things as both hollow victories and bad losses. Like Central Arkansas, you beat them by 7 in the Jones in 2014.
Then you went 4-8.
It looks mild in comparison. Like, yes, it was 7 points, but they scored at the end and tried an onside kick with, I don't know, a minute left and didn't recover, and you kneeled it out. So, like, it was a 14-point game with a minute or two left in the fourth quarter. And walking out of the stadium with that, I was like, this is probably the most hollow victory I've ever been a part of. The very next week, I drove to El Paso, and you survived UTEP. But again, that's at least on the road. That was like a really late kickoff. Honestly, it felt kind of like Laramie in some ways. And I watched Matt Wells have 2 FCS teams on the ropes. Like, this isn't the first. Stephen F. Austin in 21 had the ball in the red zone and was going for the end zone on 4th down. And if they complete a pass there, like, you lose an FCS game to Stephen F. Austin. Zach Kelly, when he was at Houston Baptist, torched us. And I don't know if we got as close to losing that one. My memory is a little bit foggy, but again, if you're a season ticket holder, and I don't even have to go that far. I mean, like Fort Worth is 4.5 hours. If you live in Houston and there's 7 home games, why on earth would you ask for Friday off work, drive 8 or 9 hours to watch us potentially for the 4th time in the last decade or so, 5th time in the last decade or so, scrape by the skin of our teeth against the worst team we're going to play all year? It's not enjoyable from a fan's perspective. And unfortunately, we're scheduling more and more of these games because I guess playing at home is paramount to anything else. So, like, there's going to be a lot of FCS, a lot of Kent State. I don't know who the heck else. I'm sure we'll play Bowling Green or whoever, but I don't blame any fan for saying, like, this isn't fun anymore. I'm going to spend my money elsewhere. I didn't understand that as much before, like, being married with kids and all that, because, like, what else am I going to do on the weekend? But now it's like, if your kid has a baseball game and you'd rather stay in Dallas to watch that, I don't blame you. And that was not the sentiment that we got from Joey after the game. Like, hey, our fans deserve better. We didn't expect to come out that bad. We've got a lot to work on this week. Instead, it was like, hey, yeah, like 1-0, as if we had like just beaten Oregon or Oklahoma State or somebody in the season opener. And again, if you survive as a 10 or 14 point favorite, okay, maybe you just exhale and okay, on to the next one. You were favored by so much that it was like it should have been a borderline impossibility that you lose that game. And it very much was not. In fact, you were probably fortunate to have won that game.
And you can do it in a way that's not bashing your players, because you don't want to see that either. You don't want to see them coming out and saying, man, people sucked. Horn was awful. Couldn't cover a slick boiled okra if we had spiked gloves on. Like, you can't say any of that either. But how hard is it to say, hey, Joey, how do you feel about that win? Not great. Don't feel great about that. We should have been better. I thought our depth was better than theirs. High praise to Keith Patterson and his team. They came out to play. We did not. They took us to the deep end of the pool, but we survived. It is great to win a college football game, but you have to be more competitive, and we have to be more competitive moving forward. Like, how hard is it to say something like that instead of, yeah, win's a win? What do you think about the celebrating on the field after the game?
That's exactly what I was about to bring up. I think what kind of made the post-game comments worse with hindsight was celebrating after the game, but also the celebrating, I think it was after the Caleb Douglas touchdown at the end of regulation. He got the championship belt and sat down with it on the bench, and I'm sitting there like I'm sweating through my shirt against Abilene Christian, and like we get a absolute necessity touchdown at the end of regulation, and it's time for the belt, and it's just like, come on, just hand the ball to the official, walk over to the sidelines, sit down, and go get your defense to get a stop. Like, what are we doing here?
I think after our field goal, after we mismanaged the clock and we were going to give them the ball back down 3 with plenty of time left, I think it was a chip shot. I think it's 28, 29 yards. And I think we did pull the arrow out and bow and arrow move. It was like, guys, y'all are about to freaking lose to Abilene Christian. What the hell are you doing? And you also can't just like hang your head and mope like before the clock hits 0. Like, you do have a game to win. But yeah, they're acting like they just beat the Dallas Cowboys or something. And it completely missed the mark, in my opinion. I mean, you don't want to tell players like, oh, don't celebrate a win. And like, yeah, thank God we did survive and didn't lose. But honestly, and this season didn't turn out any better. I referenced being in El Paso in 2014 when you barely survived UTEP there. That was kind of the vibe going off the field. Like, every player was walking with his head down to the locker room, which frankly should probably be like an appropriate reaction. And there was one player that like wanted to go like jump into the stands and like high five everybody. And it was kind of cool because you got to high five a player and stuff, but it was also like, hey, like that was the University of Texas El Paso, not the University of Texas. And played like crap for the majority of this game. So I don't know what the message is going to be in the building, in the meeting rooms. but I really hope it's not, hey, everybody pat yourselves on the back for beating Abilene by 4 yards when you were supposed to meet it by 34 points.
Oh, we've got a comment here from Charles Kikumoto. Tried to say it right the first time. Left Denver at 4 a.m. and drove all the way to get that game. Is this the same Charles that was on the what was it, the U.S. Open or the Masters or something with his double D hat on? Remember that?
I don't, but if he is willing to make that drive for that game, especially if he does it again for North Texas, he's a better man than I.
I think it was maybe the Mito Pereira Masters or Open. His daughter's on the Palm Squad or something. I remember writing about that. Anyways, shout out to you if that's you. Oh yeah, the Masters. There you go. They can choreograph celebrations but can't handle bleeding the clock on the fly. I take back what I said. Yeah. All right. I think we've discussed the ACU game ad nauseum. Let's get into some lines for next weekend. Kyle, do you have those pulled up or do I need to grab them?
I did not have them.
Okay, I can grab the Circa if you talk for a second.
Sure. I think at Circa we opened as 1 or 1.5 point favorites, which I was surprised. I thought it was going to be – I didn't expect – I think fans – way overreact. Like I remember after Wyoming when we lost that game, people were like, oh, Oregon's going to be favored by 30. And I was like, I don't know if they'll give them more than a touchdown in Lubbock. And I think it was right around a touchdown. I thought Wazoo was going to be like 3.5 point favorites. I think had you set that line on like last Friday night before either of us played, we would have been 3.5 point favorites. So I was effectively expecting like a 1 touchdown swing because they played really well in their game against an FCS opponent. They looked like a bad matchup for us. But Vegas doesn't just move a line 20 points because of 1 week. So I thought we would be 3 to 4 point underdogs. We opened favored by 1, I think. And then at other books, I think it's already moved to Wazoo favored by 2.5. So I don't know where it is at the book you're looking at or where it is live. Kind of confusing, though, in terms of the opening and where it moved. I would have hammered Wazoo plus any amount of points at the opening if I was into that kind of thing.
All right, so I've just opened it up on Action. They just take the best line for you, so the biggest line generally. BYU SMU is going to open at plus 11.5. It's already moved to plus 12 for BYU against SMU. That game's on Friday night. I'm going to run through these. If you want to talk about one, just stop me. Pitt Cincinnati opened at 2.5. In favor of Cincinnati, now down to 1.5 favorites there for the Bearcats.
Yeah, I'm taking Pitt there.
Pitt looked good this weekend. Kansas State Tulane. Kansas State open up at 6.5 point favorites. They're already at minus 10. Arkansas Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State minus 7.5. LSU has tied USC, by the way. Utah Baylor minus 15.5 for the Utes in a non-conference matchup.
Might sprinkle a little bit, maybe.
I would love for Baylor to win that game.
At least cover. I mean,
yeah, look competitive. Iowa State, Iowa in the Cyhawk matchup. Iowa 40 points in their first game, minus 3 over Iowa State. West Virginia, no spread against Albany. UCF minus 23 over Sam Houston State. Illinois Dogs at home against Kansas plus 5.5. Colorado, Nebraska at a touchdown even. Dylan Raiola. Little Cuzzo, as Patrick Mahomes calls him. Could be a shootout. Let's see. Houston, Oklahoma, 28-point line. Started at 21.5, and I might still bet Oklahoma on that. TCU, LIU, no line on that. Arizona, Northern Arizona, no line on that. Arizona State, Mississippi State. Arizona State, 4.5-point favorites. Opened up at 1.5. And then, as you said, Washington State opened up 1.5 favorites for Texas. Tech has flipped to 1.5 for Wazoo at this particular book. On the post-game show last night, Coors Light post-game show on Double T 97.3. You can listen to it on Double T 97.3 every game day. I did say maybe 5 for Washington State. But again, I felt like that would be a giant overreaction, and Vegas just doesn't do that. Again, you said 3 or 4, Kyle. I would have agreed with you if we did our Gauchos After Dark last night. I would not be surprised if this closed closer to 4 than 1.5, which would be a 5-point swing.
What's the just general reaction you'll have to this game effectively being a toss-up? Like where it opened, where it is now, maybe one team has a 55% chance to win, but
I would bet Washington State.
I think that's what everybody's reaction is going to be. And as you know, when there's a line this seemingly whack, it seems to have a tendency to go the other way. I'm not a fan of ignoring the market, both when it's in your favor or to your detriment. It's like the one thing that kind of tempered my expectations for last year was like everybody's talking Big 12 dark horse and the market's saying 7.5 wins. So I know Tech fans think we're going to go up there and lose by 50, and the market's like, no, like it's going to come down to the final possession. And that isn't how all the people I know feel about it. It's not how they would bet if they were betting on this game. But it does kind of make me wonder. The FPI analytics swung huge after this game. You went from like 60% to beat Wazoo to now I think like 2-1 that Wazoo will win. FPI thinks that if Arizona State came to Lubbock tomorrow, Arizona State would be favored, which you were going to be favored by about a touchdown in that game before the season started. There's some others too that moved pretty wildly. It was kind of sobering. It was like, wow, one game, and according to this one analytics model, they've already determined you're like a full touchdown or maybe more worse than you were 48 hours ago, which is pretty upsetting, to be honest with you.
Somebody commented earlier it was a 4-8 record that the FPI has now for Texas Tech.
No, people always get that wrong.
Well, yeah, I know what you're saying here. Go ahead.
I think if you're 51% to win a game, they count that as a win, and it's not. You have to look at the cumulative like win percentage across 11 more games. So you didn't go from 8-4 to 4-8 on that. You went from like 7.5 to I don't know, probably 6.5 or 6 or something on the aggregate.
They just called targeting on LSU to put USC in field goal range to win this game.
Is it about to be the last play?
There's 18 seconds left. I didn't see the targeting. Hold on, let me. Doubles left, doubles right, trips right, empty. Catch incomplete. Yeah, that's probably targeting.
I think he caught that.
If he caught it too, that's not on the doorstep. That's oh wow. Yeah, USC's gonna win this game. Great. Awesome. Go Lincoln.
Do we still have part of the mailbag to do?
Yeah, let's rip the Matador Transit mailbag. We normally do this every Wednesday night on our Patreon episodes, but we thought since a lot of them were ACU related, we'll get to the ACU questions again. The bulk of the mailbag will be on patreon.com/Gamblin Gauchos if you want to join us there. It is $5 a month. You get an extra podcast episode. You get plenty of writing from Money Mainville and Kyle Jacobson as well. Let's go to the mailbag. Scale of 1 to 10, how concerning is this defensive performance?
9.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Let's see. How hot is Joey's seat if we go 6-6 after this game?
I think not that hot. I think fans assume that the likelihood of a coaching change swings as wildly as their emotions do right after a win or a loss. And it's not the case. When you look at Aranda is now on like basically his third full different try with different offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators. Joey hasn't even played that card once. Like, I think we could go 3-9 this year, and he would have to fire some coordinators for sure. But he would still get to play that card and not have a clean slate. But like you do that, and then you go 8-4 the next year, and like you're not on the hot seat anymore, in my opinion. So I think we're actually a ways away from that. Which maybe that's a hot take after, like I just got done ranting that you were 4 yards away from losing the worst loss in program history, but 6-6 doesn't feel like hot seat to me.
Over under 4.5 wins this year.
Over.
Did ACU take us to the deep end of the pool? Yes. Yes, they did.
Yeah, we just learned how to swim after last year.
The next comment was, did we even get in the pool? Yeah, we got in the pool. Certainly got in the pool early. Did Texas Tech miss on Maverick McIver?
You know, it was hard to watch that game and think this guy is definitely worse than all the guys we've gone through since he stepped on campus. I know we never got to see him play, but the fact that he was like allegedly never even close to cracking the 2 deep, when I did get a pretty good sample size of Jet Duffy, Henry Colombi, Alan Bowman, all these other guys, I did not watch Maverick McIver on Saturday and think, you know, yeah, he definitely wasn't as good as those guys. Because I was thinking the exact opposite. It was like, this guy's really freaking good. He's maybe missed on a couple throws, and thank goodness, because he nearly threw a perfect game, and if he had, we would have lost.
I think he found a system that really complements who he is as a quarterback too.
Yeah, and I think that's his best game ever. I mean, if he'd been throwing for 500 yards a game last year, but I think he averaged close to 185 last year or something per game. So I don't know. I had a caller pre-firing that would call every week and say, why haven't we seen Maverick McIver yet? His name was Alan. And I would always say, well, you know, the thought is that he's just not great in practice or as good as anyone else. And he called last night into the post-game show. Alan did. I hadn't heard from him in 4 years. And he asked about Maverick McIver, so I thought that was pretty funny. With tonight's win against ACU, go ahead.
It's hard to believe that out of, let's call it Jet Duffy, Alan Bowman, Henry Colombi, that he's 4th out of those 4, if you add his name to that list. I don't think I buy that.
I don't. With tonight's win against ACU, will Tech be ranked in next week's FCS Top 25?
Ban whoever asked that question.
Should we tear down the new South end zone? No. Why do the coaches feel the need to force the ball to a backup quarterback? That's a great question. That is a great question. I don't get it. I don't want to run Barron Morton a lot. But if you want to call a quarterback draw, you have to be able to do it with Barron on the field. If you want to call a quarterback power, you have to be able to do that with Barron on the field. Or you have to play Cam Brown more and let him throw a couple times a game. Or else it's too predictable to just put him out there to run. It is.
That Barron QB draw where he dove and he just dove directly onto his left shoulder was so not fun.
Got up wincing.
Did he really?
Well, just like a normal football wince, but yeah, he was wincing.
He was definitely telling the sideline, like, I'm okay.
Yeah. Did you see? Hold on. That reminded me. Did you see Joey? All right. So Texas Tech goes turnover on downs at the goal line with Taj. The ACU's first play, I think, is that kind of wheel route to the tight end. Did you see that guy actually smoke Joey on the sideline? Knock Joey over when he was getting up.
I think at that point, I think after we kicked the field goal and we gave them the ball back, I think I went into the bathroom and just stared at myself in the mirror. Like I came back out to see third and goal and beyond and overtime.
Yeah.
But no, I missed most of that series on purpose.
You got to watch it on the rewatch. Joey gets absolutely smoked. Can Kyle play defensive back? I think Money was the corner in high school. Is that true?
Played tight end and a very bad Mike linebacker.
Oh.
Mainville Island, baby. Put him out there.
Let's see. Is it better to lose hope on August 31st or wait till the first weekend of October?
I think you rip the Band-Aid off, and if you suck, it's better to know early.
Did you feel worse after losing to Wyoming on the road or beating ACU by 1 at home?
So I think any win is better than any loss, generally speaking. If you lose in the national championship game, certainly you prefer that to beating Abilene in August. But I do think this was a worse performance, if that makes sense. I was more disappointed in this level of play, more disappointed in this product that we saw on the field, especially in hindsight. Again, I rewatched the Wyoming game, I've digested it, and I think it was kind of a fluky deal. You certainly missed some opportunities, but I think if you play that game 10 times, you win 7 or 8 of them. This one, as I've said multiple times, I almost feel fortunate that you got out with a win, and it's you had to make some pretty amazing plays and have some good fortune go your way just to scrape by. So I'll take a win over Abilene over a loss to Wyoming, but if it makes sense to say that at the same time that this was the more disappointing and kind of pathetic, embarrassing performance, I think that's also true.
If ACU goes undefeated, it feels a little better. That's a big if. I don't think they will. I think, again, this was their Super Bowl. But I didn't have to drive 14 hours the next day after just contemplating the loss this morning. So we're here. We're already in Lubbock. I live in Lubbock. I got to do some cool stuff on the radio pre and post. I mean, this was not as bad to me as that Wyoming trip. Probably because I was in Wyoming and had to drive home alone the next day with nothing but my thoughts. So that was definitely worse, personally. Let's see. Did the fan base almost lose this game by being more focused on Tyler Shuck than ACU? I'll take a little bit of blame for that. I went and found the audio. I rustled that up quite a bit after it was already dead. I got Lubbock trending. I wrote about it. Then everyone else wrote about it. I think I rustled it up so far that even Don Williams wrote an article about it, hammering Tyler Shuck, and he was much more eloquent than I. That was an interesting week. We'll talk about Tyler Shuck maybe more on Wednesday in the Matador Transit mailbag on the Patreon, but that was a good blow off there in the middle of the week.
I'll apologize for my role as well, and I'm strictly focused on us. I'm in a zero trash talk mode until we're not almost losing to Abilene Christian. To me, it's really hard to have sat through that game and then walk out of the stadium and be like, "Oh, Tyler Shuck's a bum," and "Oh, Baylor's so bad at football." It's we should not say a word about any other player or fan base or school or coach. Obviously not. I know we joke about fans having an impact on the game, but we should get our own house in order before being concerned about anything Tyler Shuck says on the radio or any other coach choking away a game, or if Alan Bowman throws a pick 6 next week. You're not going to find me celebrating that on Twitter. I'm focused on Tech only.
Yeah. Colorado's struggling with North Dakota State, and I'm just thinking to myself, we play this weekend. I'm not saying anything. TCU struggling with Stanford. We play this weekend. I'm not saying anything because, again, last year, TCU loses to Colorado in the morning. Whoever lost in the afternoon, slot, who was that?
Baylor lost to Texas State.
Baylor lost to Texas State. And you're just like, hell yeah, this is going to be amazing. You're up 17-0. I've said on this podcast, I texted somebody about being in the playoffs. I went back and looked for that message. Somebody had texted me about being in the playoff. And then Tyler Shuck throws the pick. I text Kyle that Tyler Shuck sucks. The season was over.
I'll never forget, like, borderline famous last words. We're walking into that stadium in Laramie. And they've got this cool little like end zone club. You're basically, you are field level. And this was like before the rain delay, so it wasn't quite kickoff, but we were about to like go up to our seats. I'd had like maybe 1 or 2 beers. And I turned to you and I just go, Tyler Shuck is going to be so good. And I felt validated after the first 15 or 20 minutes of ball. But then it's
man. For 2 whole years, we did not understand why Tyler Shuck was the starting quarterback. In that offseason, we talked ourselves into it, you and I. And just, it did not work.
I know it was against Austin P or whoever they were playing, but then, of course, he plays his best game of his career.
Yeah.
In his first game after leaving Tech. It's like, yeah, this is perfect. This is so great.
I'll have to go back and look. He set a bunch of career highs against Florida International in Lubbock. But I think that game was better than I think he literally set a bunch of career highs against Austin P.
And they didn't use him as a runner at all. I looked at the box. He had like 1 carry. I don't know how he got away with that here. It's just like I kind of feel like he was just audibling to like quarterback power every play, and I guess was allowed to do that.
I believe the rest of these fit into next week's or this weekend's midweek mailbag. Somebody's asking for letter grades for each position group. I think we can run through that one pretty quickly. I'll just give you I'll give it to you and y'all give me a quick letter grade. All right. So we'll start offensively. We'll go quarterback.
A.
Agreed. Running back.
A.
A minus.
I'm going to lean A minus because we didn't see the other 2 run more than 1 carry, but they did have 5 and 6 yards in 1 carry apiece. Tight end.
B.
B minus.
Yeah, I thought Tharp played a bunch of snaps. I don't understand Tharp at wideout. I think that's John Carlos Miller or Jalen Conyers. And I get it if you have him in there in line and then you run tempo and the next call is like he has to be flexible. But I didn't think you used your tight ends to the best of their abilities this weekend.
I want a lot more Conyers.
A lot more. Especially if you're just going to run the ball or throw the ball. Like he needs to be out there instead of Tharp. If you're running the ball, Tharp. If you're passing the ball, Conyers and JC. All right, offensive line. I mean, Barron was sacked twice. You ran for 157 yards.
And on his sack, he was back there for 4 or 5 seconds.
Coverage sack, yeah.
Now, I do think, like I said, I think Taj's performance was more of what we saw last year. It was not because of the offensive line opening a bunch of holes. C plus.
C minus.
I was thinking C plus. Defensive line.
D.
D plus.
Yeah, I thought the run fits were all right. They ran for 100 yards, but had a couple of big ones that kind of skewed that. Let's split the linebackers. So we'll go linebacker and star in the run game.
B. Yeah, B.
Run only.
Run only.
B-.
All right. Then just because I think this is all going to be the same, let's go corners, safeties, and then star and linebackers in the pass game. I'll start.
F.
F.
Maybe a little bit higher on linebackers. But
Nehemiah Martinez didn't get picked up once by a linebacker going across the field.
yeah.
F. Yeah, they were like bad misses. Like if you watch the replay, it's like Nehemiah Martinez, like you're talking about one of those crossing routes, would run through Ben Roberts' zone or whatever. And by the time like Roberts turns around to run with him, he's 10 yards away and McIver's thrown against air. Like I think it was the TCU game last year. They were still converting these pass plays, but we at least appeared in position, and they were just making better plays than us. But this was not that for the most part.
I think it's frustrating too because that was a huge area that Ben Roberts could have taken a step and truly fortified himself as an all Big 12 linebacker. But against ACU, that it still wasn't there. And that was such a consistent weakness for him last season.
Yeah, totally agreed there.
All right. Final thoughts?
One thing we didn't touch on that probably does not deserve a lot of air in the grand scheme of all these things is I think the 2-kicker thing has to get sorted out eventually, especially if you're going to be in a lot of shootouts. The last thing you need is leaving 3 points on the board because you're shuffling kickers and you bring an ice cold Gino Garcia off the bench and he hooks one left. I think that's going to be something that's got to get straightened out soon.
Yeah, all is well that ends well, but sending out a guy for a 41-yarder, which is no gimme, for his first collegiate field goal attempt
In crunch
when
time.
you're fighting for your life against an FCS team was, and he nailed it right down the middle. Okay. But like strategically, that to me is harder to justify than Gino made a 39-yarder early in the game. We'll just stick with him. I'm with you. And I've been on the record. I want one kicker. To me, that's not a position you just rotate in and out.
And I flew right past that. How would you grade the special teams? Thomas gives it an A+.
Yeah, I mean, the kick returns were great. We didn't get a chance to return a punt. I think had a fair catch 2 or 3 of those.
They didn't punt a single time, did they? Oh, yeah, they did.
Yeah, we fair caught 2 of them, I think.
Okay. All right.
We only punted once, 45 yards. That's great. So, yeah, A. Made 3 field goals.
Yeah, made all your field goals and extra points. Yep. How many booms would you rate the ACU game?
5 out of 5 dooms.
Yeah, I was about to say that's a doom. This is one of the funniest comments I've seen. Tech Facebook was right about Maverick McIver.
Yeah.
All right. I believe that's it for tonight. Join us again on Wednesday. We're live every Sunday and Wednesday night. Sunday right here on YouTube as part of the Dave Campbell's Texas Football Republic podcast feed. And then on Wednesday, it's part of our Patreon stream, patreon.com/Gamblin Gauchos, where we get a little more loosey-goosey. Money's always hammer drunk. It's a fun time. We'll also do the rest of the mailbag. There's lots of questions in there about recruiting philosophy. We'll get a little more in depth into some of the things that happened in the ACU game as it relates to the Washington State game. We'll look way more into that Washington State game on Wednesday as well. Join us on the Patreon, patreon.com/Gamblin Gauchos. It's $5 a month, but you also gain access to the #1 Discord server in Texas Tech world. And even if you're not a Texas Tech fan, if you're a Big 12 fan, we talk a lot of Big 12 football in there as well. We have a game day thread where we're watching all the games all day long, talking about all the games in college football. It's a fun time. So even if you're not a Texas Tech fan outright, lots of good football discussion in there during football season, basketball season as well, baseball, and then the off season is always a fun time too. So join up. If you just want to join up for a month and see it, you can do that as well. It's just $5. Maybe we give you a promo for the first month if you ask nicely. We'll see what we can do there. All right, that's all I have if you guys are ready as well.
Enjoyed it, boys. Woke up 1-0 with a 50 burger. On to week 2. Let's go.
Love y'all.